nobody in college is cooking. So people would be like, "You made this?"
So then you end up freelancing recipes.
Sharing recipes on Instagram is the most annoying thing ever.
Look, if you hate to cook, just don't do it.
Every afternoon, millions of Americans confront the same deceptively simple question: what are we having for dinner? In theory, the answer is easy because food is everywhere. We have more recipes, cooking videos, and meal planning advice than any generation in history. But somehow, when it's 6 o'clock, everyone's hungry and you have already made a day's worth of decisions. Infinite choice does not feel relaxing. It feels exhausting. Then there's the endless considerations. After all, the meal has to be healthy, affordable, and interesting. It has to fit everyone's food needs. The vegetables should be seasonal. The children have to like it. The kitchen should somehow remain clean. And ideally, you should look relaxed as the woman in the video who made everything in that couture dress. Yes, I'm looking at you, Nara Smith. But my guest today has built a career by rejecting most of those expectations. Carolyn Chambers' brand is aptly named. What to cook when you don't feel like cooking. It leaves room for shortcuts, substitutions, picky eaters, and the inconvenient fact that real life is usually happening when you are trying to get dinner on the table. The idea wasn't an obvious success. In fact, when Carolyn first pitched What to Cook When You Don't Feel Like Cooking as a cookbook, every publisher turned it down. They liked the concept, but they said she didn't have the audience to sell it. So, Carolyn built one. Today, her newsletter reaches roughly 600,000 readers, and the cookbook publishers rejected became a bestseller. Carolyn joins me to talk about how she turned one unwanted idea into a cooking empire, why dinner has become such a source of stress, and what we gain when we stop trying to cook the right way. And of course, we talk about her newest cookbook, What to Cook When You Don't Feel Like Cooking, Make It Fast. Caroline, welcome to the show.
Thank you. I'm so happy to be here. It's the best podcast name. Reasonably optimistic. I'm like, yes, that sums it up.
Thank you. So for those who don't know you, I want to go back to the Caroline Chambers before the newsletter, the cookbooks, because for a lot of us, love of cooking is developed or not as a child. So when did you fall in love with cooking?
Okay. So I've loved cooking for as long as I can remember. I had two working parents. My dad had a pool and spa contracting business, and he was really busy. And my mom worked in like advertising, and then she was a travel agent, and she also was really busy with work. And we were 90s kids, right? And like chores were a really big thing. And one of our chores was to help get dinner on the table. And dinner was, it was like, one chore was setting the table, one chore was actual like implementation of the meal. And my mom had these like set meals that we ate, like all of us, my brother and sister and I, we all like very fondly remember the meals that we ate all the time. There were the Sam's Club frozen taquitos. There was spaghetti carbonara that was made with sour cream and is like absolutely nothing near a spaghetti carbonara. There was my dad's spaghetti bolognese, which was just ground beef, a thing of sliced mushrooms, and then a jar of like cheap tomato sauce. So there were these simple meals that a child, after having them every single week for weeks on end, could help implement. And like I so vividly remember, filling up the pot for the spaghetti and bringing it over to the stove, and I loved it. I loved being in the kitchen with my mom. My parents, like I said, they were both working full time, so they'd not get home until around 5:30. And so that dinner hangout time was like such a crucial moment to hang out with my parents. And I now that's like such a crucial time with my boys. I have four young boys now, and that's like what we do. Like we after school, they get home, I am wrapping up work, and I'm like, okay, who wants to help me chop? And if there's nothing to chop in that night's meal, I just like hand them a stick of celery and their little kid children's knife, and they go at it. And it's time for us to sit there and hang out where I'm like really dedicated to them. And I think that's how it started for me. It was like this time that I got all this, as a kid, a middle child of three kids, it was like this dedicated time that I got to hang out with my parents. And I think that's how it started.
So how did you learn to cook as an adult, right? Because one of the things that I remember being a kid is like I knew how to do a bunch of things that were the things we did every week. And then I had vast holes in
Yes.
my
Okay.
knowledge
I
because
know
mom would
exact
do those things.
I know exactly how I learned to cook as an adult. I went to UNC Chapel Hill and I lived in a house with four girls my junior and senior years, and we compulsively watched Barefoot Contessa. Like it was our comfort show. It was this is back in the days of like, where you had to record it. What was it called? Whatever.
VHS, yeah.
VHS?
VCR.
VCR. Yeah, like we like recorded episodes,
Yeah.
like searched ahead in the schedule and like pressed the record button. And we compulsively watched Barefoot Contessa, me the most so. It was like my comfort show. It was what I watched while I was studying. It was what I did all the time. And then I started actually like bringing those meals to life. Like I would have people over and we would cook through an entire episode of Barefoot Contessa. UNC is an amazing school. I loved going there so much. Is a it's a big party school. Like you go out, you drink. And I got kind of sick of it. I was like really tired. And so I would throw dinner parties instead. And I that was what I did my junior and senior year. We would have these like elaborate dinner parties. There's a recipe in the first What to Cook book. What to Cook We Don't Feel Like Cooking. There's a recipe called, I think it's called First Date Shrimp Skillet, and it's based on this Ina Garden recipe called, I think it's called confetti corn, and it's corn and it's peppers, and I used to make it all the time. It was like what I made, and nobody in college is cooking, so people would be like, you made this. And so it's that. It's like I learned how to cook by watching that show. Learned how to cook as an adult, as you said. Like
Right.
you learn the fundamentals, and then I really learned how to like put flavors together and make a meal from Ina.
I also learned to cook in college and used to have dinner parties for people. And I loved that, like, you made that moment. That is exactly it. It was like, yes, I can produce food as if I were a
Yes.
grown up.
Yes, literally, it was like, I'm sure actually, I remember setting the table with folded up paper towels, like tearing off a paper towel, folding a paper towel in half, putting a fork on top of it. And it felt so special, and people really felt like so taken care of. And I think that's when I was like, oh, food, like feeding people feels really good to me. Like, I like the way that this feels.
So then you end up freelancing recipes. You wrote your
Yes.
first cookbook, Just Married, in 2018.
Yes.
Um, and tell me how that happened for those
So
who are not familiar with you.
I go through my dinner party era, learning how to cook in college. This was like 2011 is when I graduated from college. So Instagram was like just becoming a thing. TikTok didn't exist yet. And so there wasn't really a way to just like become a food person on your own yet. So I went into advertising in New York City. I worked in New York City, worked in advertising, and my boyfriend who I met in college and I ended up getting married, and he was in the Navy, so we moved out to San Diego. So that kind of gave me this good like career pause, like stop at a very young age. I was 24 when we moved to San Diego, so I'd only been working in advertising a few years, and I just immediately started looking for advertising jobs in San Diego. And my husband, God bless him, was like, why are you looking for advertising jobs? You don't like it. Like, you don't like it. You need to work in food. Like, all you did in New York, I was always having, my dinner parties. And when you're 22 working in advertising in New York City, you work until 8:30 at night. It's like barbaric, like the hours that you put in. And so I would do like crock pot, carnitas and crock pot chicken and just these like gross crock pot meals, and I would like take pictures of them and put them on this little like Tumblr that I started to like kind of start tracking things eventually, because I was like, I've got I wanted to be in the food space, but I just didn't know how. And so George was like, why are you doing this? Why are you looking for advertising jobs? Like, you need to work in food. And so I
Bless
wound
him.
up starting, bless him, I wound up starting a catering business called Cucina Coronado, and I grew it to be like one of the biggest catering business, the biggest catering business on Coronado, this small island for sure, but a really prominent catering business in the San Diego area. During that time, Instagram did become more of a thing, and I started sharing, pictures of my food, kind of using it more as a portfolio. And I remember like I shared this one like grapefruit brulee thing that I did for a brunch, and Food and Wine like reposted, got like 1,000 followers. And I was like, oh, okay. And that I so remember this moment where I was like, oh, like there could be something to trying to grow here. And so I kind of started posting a little bit more on Instagram. I started getting a lot of like little brands would be like, "Oh, you're a caterer. Can you develop a recipe with our cheese for us?" So I'd do that for like, $150. I'd San Diego Magazine or San Diego Bride would have like a big photo shoot, and I would style all the food for it. And so I started having these realizations of like, oh, I don't actually have to cook the food live for 300 people to work in food and like feel like my food is touching people. And so that was when I had my first sort of like, okay, maybe this is the next thing. My husband's career kind of kept us moving a lot for those first few years. So we wound up in Palo Alto. He went to Stanford Business School. So I kind of shuttered the catering business. And that was when I really started building my freelance business. I then, George, again, for his job, he ended up in New York City for a stint. I followed him to New York. Um, and there I reconnected with an old college friend of mine, Sarah Smith, who is at David Black Agency. She's a literary agent, and she does a lot of cookbooks. And we had lunch one day, and she was like, "Okay, so I was food styling for the New York Times as like my summer job." She was like, "All right, so you're in food, you're doing this. Like, would you ever want to write a cookbook?" And I was like, of course, but like, like I'm nobody. And she calls me a week later, and she's like, so I just got off the phone with Chronicle, this editor I love at Chronicle Books. They want a newlywed with like a cool story. And I told her about you and how you're married to a Navy SEAL and you guys have moved all around, and you've traveled a ton because of his job. Any chance you would want to write like a cookbook for newlyweds? And I was like, yeah, I do want to do that. And so that's how I got my first cookbook deal. And it's called Just Married, and Chronicle published it. And it's still like in pretty great circulation. Like Crate and Barrel has like their own copy of it, with their own like Crate and Barrel font cover.
And then you pitched, yeah. So then your COVID hits, your work dries up.
So Just Married was selling super well. I still was really like a relative nobody in terms of like having my own audience, right? So I really hadn't built like the name Caroline Chambers at all. Even with Just Married selling pretty well, like, I had maybe 3,000 Instagram followers, but I wasn't really doing anything with it. So I came up with this cookbook idea that I had my first son, Mattis. I had my first son, and suddenly like the way that I cooked just completely changed, as it is wont to do when you have a child. I, had this person like wanting to be held all the time, and if you put it down it would cry, and so you couldn't, the elaborate recipes and kind of the way that I loved cooking, like a 20-step short rib recipe no longer was possible. And I found myself cooking quick, easy meals really for the first time in my life. I'd never needed quick, easy meals before. I had always, I'd worked from home. I'd had the whole day to kind of cook and have that be, what I was a big part of my day. And suddenly baby Mattis said, no, that's not going to be a big part of your day. And so I came up with this cookbook concept that reflected the way that I was now cooking. So it was called What to Cook When You Don't Feel Like Cooking. And, I think in that early one, like every recipe would be under 30 minutes and under 10 ingredients. And I wanted the ingredients to be like listed in like photo format on the side so that it was like really easy. Like, okay, like we're all visual, and just this like really easy cookbook concept. And we pitched it. Chronicle had right of first refusal. They gave us like an immediate no, which Sarah was like, I'm surprised by that, but it's okay. Like, this is a good thing. Well, now we can take it out to everyone. And so we took it out to everyone, and every single person said no, but they all gave really nice no's. And they all said, Caroline has no reach. Caroline has no audience. Like, if she did, this is an awesome cookbook concept, but like, it's not going to sell. Like who's going to sell it? And so basically in the time from when I wrote Just Married, just 2 years earlier to this time, which was like 2019, the landscape for getting a cookbook deal and the landscape for how to promote your cookbook had changed so much that now Instagram and TikTok and food bloggers were such a big thing, and they all had their own audiences, their own built-in captive readers who would buy the book, and that's what publishers depended on, right? Like publishers were like, oh no, we don't give cookbook deals to people who don't have their own audience anymore. Like we have to know that you're able to sell it. And I didn't have that. And so I was like crushed. And I was like, oh no, but like I'm not an Instagrammer. I'm like a real recipe developer. Like it's what I do for my job, Like how am I gonna find the time to be an Instagrammer when like this is my career? And then a few months later, COVID happened, and that's what you were getting to. All of my clients just were like, "Oh, we don't know how to market food during a global pandemic. Like a wine brand is no longer promoting a Mother's Day brunch because Mother's Day brunch isn't happening this year." I was working with Corona Beer, like right at the start of coronavirus. Like I had this huge contract, one of my biggest contracts ever with them, and I was overseeing like the shooting of it, the food styling and the photography and everything. And we shot it on March 17th down at a food photography studio in Monterey. We shot this huge campaign for Cinco de Mayo. It's like grilling and appetizers, and on March 17th, 2020. And then obviously they, paid the bill, and none of that stuff ever saw the light of day. It was going to be on like billboards. It was like a big, big, big campaign.
Does anyone else feel like August is the Sunday of summer? Things are not quite over, but they're about to be over. But that kind of makes it a perfect time to beat the autumn rush and get a head start on your wardrobe. That's why I turned to Quince. I'm wearing Quince right now, as I usually am. In fact, the sweater I'm wearing, I have 4 of these. I love it so much. And that's Quince all over. It specializes in effortless, high-quality essentials like ultra-soft organic cotton and premium Mongolian cashmere sweaters. They're beautifully tailored, built to last, and transition seamlessly from morning meetings to dinner or the beach. Quince also has premium stitched denim starting at just $50 with the kind of perfect fit, structure, and weight you'd expect from a luxury designer brand. I have now 3 pairs of Quince jeans, and they're perfect. And my tall ladies out there, they have them in tall. Everything at Quince is priced 50 to 80% less than similar brands, and they work directly with ethical factories, and they cut out the middleman, so you're paying for quality, not brand markup. It's not just apparel. Quince also brings that same everyday elevation to everything they offer. From hotel quality bedding, I think our longtime listeners have heard me talk about my love affair with Quince's European linen sheets. And bath, they've got kitchen staples, essentials, and thoughtfully designed furniture even. So why not take the pause to upgrade your everyday? Download the Quince app for app-exclusive offers or go to quince.com/Megan. Get free shipping on your order and 365-day returns. And that's now available in Canada and the UK too. That's quince.com/Megan, QUINCE.com/Megan.
So you then decide that you're going to do a newsletter, and you're going to take this cookbook that no one will buy, and you're going to make it into a newsletter. And do you think the pandemic, so first of all, actually tell me, how excited, scared, fearless, desperate were you when you did this? Like, what was how planned was it, and how much of it was just like, well, I'm going to try something?
When I launched it as a newsletter?
Yeah, when you launched it as a newsletter.
God, such a good question, because it was pretty impulsive. I was listening to a podcast one day, and it was basically, she like kind of offhanded mentioned Substack as this way to like monetize your community. And at this point, so COVID starts, all my recipe development clients go away. And so I start finally just sharing tons of recipes on Instagram. And so I had started growing a little community. I had like probably 10,000 followers at this point. I'm really sharing a ton of recipes. And what I'm finding is that sharing recipes on Instagram is the most annoying thing ever, right? Like you you have to like shorthand them to fit them into the caption, and then if you're trying to follow the recipe on Instagram, you're like scrolling down and there's a video playing in the background, and it's like a really horrible way to follow a recipe. I happen to be, COVID. I'm like on a hike, on a walk with a baby strapped to me. And I heard on this podcast I was listening to, they like talked about Substack, and Substack was really new, but it was, a way to self publish. And the podcast was, I cannot remember what it was or who it was, but it was all about how owning your email list is like the most important thing that you can do. Like Instagram algorithm is going to change, TikTok algorithm is going to change, but your hopefully Google, email will always arrive in chronological order, and it will always arrive in your inbox. Like it'll always be there. Whereas on Instagram, you might never see a post from me, even if you really like my stuff. So that's how I first grew my newsletter. And then after a few months of sending these newsletters that just like were kind of like introducing the idea that I was going to introduce, I launched What to Cook We Don't Feel Like Cooking. It was $35 a year, the price of a cookbook. So like, 50 cents a recipe or whatever. It was a new recipe every single Saturday, or every single Sunday back then. Now it's Saturdays. And it was going to be easy and approachable, and I was going to teach you how to do the whole thing. And it really resonated with people really quickly.
So how much do you think the pandemic helped you? Because I bullied my husband into starting. He's a pretty hardcore amateur cocktail enthusiast, and I basically bullied him into starting a cocktail newsletter during on Substack
Amazing.
during the pandemic, because I was like, honey, there are people home. They need you.
My entire career trajectory, everything is 100% tied to COVID. I wasn't betting on myself before COVID happened. I should have done this years ago, started developing my own recipes and sharing them. And I do it every now and then. Every now and then, I would have a lull in freelance work, and I'd share a new recipe just straight on my Instagram to my, 1,000 followers that I had. And they'd be so excited, and they'd all cook it, and I'd hear about it, and I'd be like, God, that felt so good. But then the next freelance job would come in, and I'd go, well, I got to take that because that's going to pay
That's a
me
real job.
$500. That's a real job. I can't do that. That's for free. And COVID forced me to bet on myself and to try to do it, because I was like, I have to find a way to make money. Like there's no money. I'm not going to make any money from freelance recipe development right now. Like I've got to give this a shot. And so it just fully, and it was this captive audience of people who don't like cooking, who were stuck at home and had to cook. And I had them, I was in their ear, and they were on their phones all day long. And so I had this audience of people just waiting for a new recipe every day.
You have a pretty deep relationship with your audience. Who is the median person who is subscribing to What to Cook?
We just did a big audience survey. So I will tell you what that survey told us, and then I'll tell you who I think they are. I think that the vast majority of my audience is people in the same phase of life as I am. They are working moms who are trying to get dinner on the table every night and failing at it often, and wanting to try new recipes but feeling exhausted by the influx of all the recipes all over the internet. And so they follow me, and they're like, I'll just cook Caroline's recipes. That's the like archetype of who my person is me, because they follow me, and through my food stories, when I'm talking about why did I develop this recipe this way, it's because my two kids are in camp, and the story is about my children, and it's about my life, and where I was in New York last week for work, and I got home super late, and I was sending groceries, and it's the story of me. And so I think people find themselves in that. So that's who I think like the main archetype of a What to Cook reader is. but she is also, she's 35 to 65. Like 99% female audience, which I love. I love girls, boo boys. Um,
It's a boy
99%
mom speaking.
female. Yeah. Girls only club for this audience. What else? She 65% of my audience is working are working moms, and like only like 70% of them are moms. So 30% are not parents who are working. 65% are working moms. So there's this
I
like,
can testify, even without children, it can be incredibly challenging
oh
to
yeah,
get dinner
so
on the
so
table every
often,
night.
yes, so often I find myself, telling the story of why it's hard to get dinner on the table, and I tell my own story, and then I have to be like, wait, but you don't have, like, I know that kids don't have to be in the picture. We all fill up our busy bucket with whatever we have. Like people very often, because I have four small kids, are like, I don't understand how you're getting all this done. And I'm like, the same way you are. I'm just as busy as you are. It's just a different kind of busy. I'm like, my busy bucket is full in different ways. You fill it up with, you're on a board and you play, you know, mahjong. I've never even seen a mahjong board in my life, but like that counts as busy too. Or, we all have our own busyness.
And so, what do you think your main value proposition? I can tell you what I think your main value proposition is, but I'm curious what you think your main, like, what is it? Is it the easiness? Is it just taking away the decision fatigue?
Yeah, I
Is
think
it that
it's
they don't know how to cook very well, or they just don't want to think about it?
so as a actually one of my sort of like advisors at Substack said to me many years ago, the irony of your newsletter, of course, is that the readers actually do feel like cooking. Everyone who follows this newsletter actually does in some way feel like cooking, and that's why they're here. Like they they might not think that they love it. They might think that they're too tired or too busy or too whatever, but they want to be people who cook dinner for their family. And so I think I make that easier for people. I my thing from the start has been, if you just cook one thing this week, let it be this. I write the ingredients. I think the thing that keeps people coming back for more is the way I write recipes, which is like incredibly detailed, um, but not overly so. So I try to write them as if I'm standing in the kitchen with you, and it just has created this kind of community feel of like, all right, if she can do it, I can do it. And then the comment section is everybody explaining how they did it and how they adapted it. The whole thing, What to Cook also got its like signature, je ne sais quoi. Because of COVID, I started listing a substitution for every single ingredient
That
because,
is a fantastic innovation, by the way. I'm
and it's
just like a
given,
huge fan of this.
thank you. I think it's really given this like teach a man to fish mentality and quality to the newsletter, as opposed to just giving a man one recipe and saying, this is the recipe, follow it exactly as is, which is kind of the way that I grew up thinking that what recipes were. A recipe is a recipe. You follow a recipe. This is like, if you don't like fennel, use onion, use cauliflower. If you have pork tenderloin in the refrigerator or in the freezer, use that instead of chicken breasts. Here's how to adapt it.
So, what do people write you about most often? Because one reason I wanted to talk to you is I feel like people like you who are not just writing but so intimate with their readers have a pretty good eye on how stuff is changing out there. I mean, so what are the perennials that people are writing you about, and what's new?
The thing that I hear most from my audience is not about food. In the emails that I get, the DMs that I get on Instagram, when I go on book tour and I see people live, we are talking about all of the other things that surround why do I not feel like cooking. So I'll get, you know mostly from young moms like me, or moms of young children, I should say. I'm not young. Mostly from young moms of young children like me. I hear like seeing how you let your kids cook with you, even though it makes it more chaotic, has made cooking like such a more fun experience for me. I used to think that like dinner needed to be on the table and the kids couldn't be involved. And so the kids were, I was trying to keep the kids entertained, and now they cook with me and it's chaos, but I love it. Or I hear, it's always things that I don't even know I'm doing that people will react to. Like yesterday, my son Callum was helping me make pizzas, and he's like sitting on the kitchen counter with his bare feet. And I got a bunch of messages from people that are like, bare feet on the counter. And then I got way more, the vocal minority is like people who want to tear you down. They're like, bare feet on the counter, gross. And I just ignore those at this point. I got like 100 messages from moms being like, I love how you include your kids in the kitchen with you, and how you know, like let him sit with his grubby feet on the kitchen counter, because like who cares? And those are the message though. That's what I really love, is like talking to other people who are kind of, or I'll hear from, a woman who was like, I'm an empty nester. I, had one daughter, she's grown and gone. And I love watching your videos to remember like what motherhood was like. There's a real gamut, but the majority of what I hear from people directly is not about food at all. It's about the things that surround the food, the life that
So
surrounds the food.
why is home cooking so important to them? This is like really important to me, but I used to make people mad by saying like, look, if you hate to cook, just don't do it. Just there are many Stouffer's makes a wonderful lasagna. You could just not do it. But for the people who want to, why do they want to, even though they don't feel like it?
I think, God, it's such a great question. I mean, why do we cook? We cook because it feels really good to cook for the people we love. But I also think so many people are cooking just for themselves, and because it feels real. Like my friend Carver, she lives in DC. She works for Tucker Nuck. She has this awesome career. She's single, and she cooks my recipes like religiously. And she sends me a picture and she tells me, this is how I froze half of it because it made 8 portions and I'm cooking just for myself. And she is so proud of herself when she cooks a meal just for herself. And I think it feels really good to like do something for yourself that feels really good and tastes really good and took time just for yourself. It's like so much more satisfying to cook a beautiful meal for yourself, for your family, than it is to grab it. Unless you hate cooking, in which case I'm with Megan. Stouffer's exists, and don't do it.
I mean, I would say, like, to me, you're selling, I mean, the food is great, but you're selling time, right? It's like, I don't have to think about it. And it's just like, I get time back. Although I do have to ask, you talk about, you're like, go to the pool, go to a beach, whatever. You got a lot on your plate. Do you ever actually get to do any of these fun things you tell us we could be doing with the time we've reclaimed?
With the time we've reclaimed. I spent a lot of time yesterday at the pool with my kids. It's funny, as what to cook grows, I find it harder to like, as the audience grows and as my, time gets crunched with writing books and sponsored content and all these things. I find it harder and harder and harder to get dinner on the table and to have the time to do the things that I am preaching, are so important, or, not preaching, but am saying, we should make time for. But yeah, I do. I really do. And I often lean on store-bought convenience, and I love sharing that. Like I am the biggest proponent of a salad kit with some protein added for lunch. I am, the first one to buy the pre-chopped butternut squash. I cook dinner for my family every single night of the week, but sometimes it looks like frozen meatballs from Trader Joe's with some cheesy rice that, is microwaved rice with some cheese added, with some spinach chopped up and added. And it's not always like a beautiful, multi-part meal. Sometimes it's really slapped together, and that's all right.
So do you think part of what you're giving people is permission not to do the normal Instagram influencer like, look, I made this in my beautiful white linen dress, and somehow none of the pasta sauce ended up on the dress, and I'm putting it on the table. My hair has not frizzed from the humidity of the pasta pot because I am a miracle. And like, not you have lovely aspirational images that make me feel bad about my like it's on a plate, eat it
No,
style of service, but
no, 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 no,
um
no.
but you also
I
do like you
Yes,
give
I
it
hope
does feel
so.
like you
Yeah,
create a permission structure.
I hope that that's exactly what I do. And I think the newsletter, I know it's funny, the newsletter images even used to be so much more just like me holding it. There'd be like kids crawling around in the background and be like bowl of soup in my hand, and that was the picture. And as it's grown and as people, my readership of what to cook has now like far eclipsed my Instagram following. Like I have 600,000 readers and I have like 300,000 Instagram followers. So I'm now in a place where a lot of my readers actually don't have kind of the backstory of who I am, and why would that bowl of soup just be snapped like that? And so if they're paying me for these recipes, I now, I use like a professional food photographer, and so the images and stuff look a little bit more um professional than they used to. So I my Instagram will never change because it is exactly who I am. Like I want people to see exactly how messy and unpolished dinner time is here, uh, because these recipes that I'm sharing are simple, delicious food that doesn't need a fuss behind it. It's about eating the food with the people you love, and so I try to keep when I share the recipes on Instagram, there is complete chaos. There are like turtles running in. My son Callum like runs in with his shirt covered in lizards, and um, that is real life around here, and so that's
And
kind
it's
of what
still
I'm.
going to be some of the best memories of your kids' lives, right? And yours,
Yes,
probably.
yes,
Those
yes.
those moments in the kitchen. The show's called Reasonably Optimistic. And what makes you optimistic about the future of food culture?
The future of food culture. I think that
Food,
the
family. What with like the future of food and family in America?
I think Martha Stewart is like my hero, right? She's an icon. She has created this incredible behemoth of a business. She also created a food culture of like people thinking that everything needed to look perfect and their dinner table needed to look perfect and they needed to be the consummate host. And I love what she did for hosting and entertaining. I also think it can be a whole lot easier, and I hope to be kind of a part of that revolution of um, you know feeding people food can be really, really fun and really, really easy. And it doesn't need to be this perfect affair. You can welcome in, a podcast studio, to your messy playroom, and no one's going to judge you for the fact that you're sitting on the floor in the middle of your kid's playroom because that was the quietest place to be. I think as like Instagram and TikTok allow us more into each other's lives, like you were saying, there is this perfect food, like look at my perfect pasta and my perfect white linen dress. We are seeing that, but the content that I think people are really relating to is the moms out there like me and the people out there like me who are, getting dinner on the table despite it all, and not trying to make it look perfect. And I think that people like that and are seeing that. And I think that social media went through this really dark period where everyone was acting really perfect on it, and like, you know, it was this like perfect polished thing, and it was really fucking with everyone's mental health and making everyone think I have to have this perfect polished life. And I think we're coming out of the other end of that, and we're starting to show, you know, our true selves and what's really going on at home. And that's what I try to do. Just share how fun and messy life can be, especially in the kitchen.
My mother was one of the best cooks I've ever met, but she had a friend who got into Martha Stewart. It was a guy. It was hilarious. It was the son of one of her friends, but he became her friend as well. And he had been reading Martha Stewart or watching Martha Stewart, and she had told him that you should tie chopsticks to the tails of your lobsters before you steam them so that the tails will be straight rather than curly. And I will never forget my mother chasing the lobsters around the kitchen with the chopsticks for about 10 minutes. And she just finally turned to him and said, Roger, if you don't like your lobsters with curly tails, you can eat somewhere else. And I think that is like, you know
That
what?
is it. That
It's
is the
okay.
best anecdote that you could have possibly provided for this. Like, that is honestly, that's my cooking. It's taking rules that people learned, like your lobster tails can't be curly, or, you know, my recipe, a recipe I recently shared was this one pot shrimp bowl. And normally you'd cook your veggies and your rice separately, and then you'd grill your shrimp or cook your shrimp in a separate pan. And I'm telling you, do it all in one pan. Like, no, Gordon Ramsay would not be happy with this. Martha would not make this, but it is so delicious. It is literally your entire mess in one pot, and you're gonna completely love it, even though it's not like cooked the way that you were taught shrimp have to be cooked. Like, trust me, you'll love it.
It's on my queue. So I am trusting you, although I may sub chicken.
Oh, I like
Because,
that. You can read the notes. There's a really good chicken
yes,
sub.
there
Yep,
was a chicken sub and I
there's
was
a chicken
eyeing it.
sub. Yes.
Anyway, I am optimistic
Yes.
that like people are finding new ways to cook, including through you. And we are out of time, but thank you so much for being with us
Thank
today.
you. Thank you. Thank you. It was so nice to be here.